Hey, it's your financial maven, Samantha Besnoff, CPA, and after almost 25 years in the accounting world, I've decided to share my insights and passion about money. Knowing your money and hopefully feeling less stress about your money is what I call being financially empowered. Welcome to the Your Financial Maven podcast. Welcome to another episode of Your Financial Maven. So today I am speaking with guest Christian Brim, CEO of Core Group, where he specializes in providing creative business owners in videography, cinematography, photography, influencer and content creation and marketing agencies with vital financial services such as accounting, bookkeeping, tax planning. And I know that, Christian, it stems from how life has a way of teaching us invaluable lessons, and that you noted in your bio it was from the experience of your family's bankruptcy as a child, which molded you to determination to help others to thrive financially. So, Christian, welcome so much to Your Financial Maven.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yes, very excited. So I'm going to get started. I'm going to ask you one question first, and then we'll get really into it. So what is money?
Money is a tool.
Okay. And I guess that tool, I just mentioned that your family went through bankruptcy when you were a child. So that moment or any other moments in your life, or your financial journey, how has that shaped you in the money management area?
Well, I think the way we are brought up to think about money from watching others, a lot from our nuclear family, but others, kind of dictates the patterns and the mindsets that we have towards money later in life. And I find that a lot of people, a lot of business owners specifically, don't really ever take time to unpack that and really understand what they learned and how it affects what they do, how they feel. And that kind of puts you in a reactive state where your subconscious and your brain training is driving behaviors that you may not even be aware of.
Is there any particular story or anything that sticks in your mind for yourself that you share with your clients or, other small business owners as you've gone through your financial journey?
Well, I grew up in a family business. My father worked with his brother and his grandfather, and there were a lot of pluses around that. And not just financial. I mean, it was more, to me, it was the closeness because we were always together. And that distinction between work and family was blurred. They crossed over. And when the business went bankrupt, the most devastating thing to me at age 16 was the effect it had on the family. That,
I'm sure it did, yeah.
Basically, everybody scattered to the four corners to, find food. And that's what made the emotional impact on me was the family disruption, not necessarily the loss of material things.
But when it comes to your business and you're running a business and the money aspect of it, there's still a lot of emotion tied to that for businesses.
Oh, 100%. And I'll go a step further than that. I'm working on a project around entrepreneurial mental health. And part of that is I'm reading studies and papers, clinicals. And there was a study done where they did a brain scan, an MRI of male entrepreneurs. And when they showed them pictures of their business, the same part of their brain lit up as it did when they showed them pictures of their kids. And so when you hear an entrepreneur say, well, that's my baby, they literally mean it. And a lot of the emotion of that success or failure of your child is the same thing. And it's almost a self-identity. Like if my kid fails, that's a reflection on me. And same thing with the business. And that can get tied into the emotions that you have about money. And in my case, it was the loss of money meant loss of family. And that's a complicated emotion to tease out. So I had to understand that to understand, okay, how is this playing out in my business? One of the things that I realized fairly early on was like, I didn't want to repeat those mistakes. But what was interesting was for really the first 10, 15 years of the business, I was repeating the same mistakes, but I didn't really make the connection or realize it. And what that mistake was that you don't have to worry about money. It'll always be there and you'll just go make more. And so I didn't pay enough attention to my profitability. I always made money, but I didn't make the money I should. And I used a lot of excuses to justify that. Like, I'm reinvesting the business, I'm growing the business. But it wasn't until I sat down and said, I don't think you're being honest with yourself, and figuring out why that was and what I needed to do differently, that it really changed.
And you make a very valuable point, and I've talked about this before, and I continue to talk about it, that when you start a business, when you're running a business, even if you don't have that accounting degree or the tax professional degree or the law degree, you have to still pay attention to that. And if you don't know how to read a financial statement, it's a story that they tell. Hire that professional, get some consultation, get somebody to help you, because I think that the story that your books tell you, your balance sheet, your profit and loss tell you, can give you more insight to help you determine, do I still sell this particular, widget? Do I need to spend more on marketing? Am I spending too much in that area? You make a very valuable point.
Well, and I love that you said that it was a story, because that's the exact analogy I use. People say, oh, well, you're a CPA, you must like numbers, or you must be good at numbers.
I get it all the time too.
Right? And I'm like, well,
right.
95% of the math is arithmetic, and I learned that in second grade. So, to me, it's more like a language.
Yeah. And you're right. I always get, oh, you were a math major. No, I wasn't a math major. I was an accounting major, right?
And just like you wouldn't go on a trip to a foreign country, even with Google Translate, and not know some key phrases, you as a business owner need to know some key phrases about a lot of things, finances being one of them. And you can't avoid that, or you're going to get lost.
Yeah. And that's where that story of you read your profit and loss, and it's numbers on a page. You see your income, you see your expenses, what you made, but you have to delve into your expenses. You're spending X amount on an area. Do you need to be spending on that area? Can you make adjustments? I work with a lot of nonprofits as well, and I always tell them every few years you should be bidding out for new auditors or bidding out to the current auditor you're using, because you never know, you could save some money. And you can translate that to small business owners. You might have been with a vendor for so many years because they're your best friend or whomever, but you might not be getting the right value for your money. And it's okay to review that stuff.
Yeah, I always like to start with, what is the business plan? What is it that you're trying to achieve from a business standpoint? I want to grow here. I want to have this much in profitability, or I want to add this new location, whatever the business plan is. And then I like to look to see if the numbers tell the story. Okay, are you doing what the business plan set out to? Because everything you do in the business will eventually be reflected in the financial statements. And business owners and entrepreneurs, they have this weird characteristic where they can see things as they could be. They see the possible, they see the vision of what they want. And the flip side of that characteristic, which most people don't have, but the flip side of that is it allows us to really deny reality, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like what's actually happening. I know what you want to happen, but what's actually happening?
Like, how do you get there? And, that's important. You work in the creative space, and you've got all these different creative areas, individuals, clients that you work with. And I'm sure for you, going from pre-internet or pre-social media to all of this digital stuff, the social media, having to get your videos out and things like that, I'm sure for you working with your clients, that whole thing has shifted because there's more tangible, you see stuff. You could have a creator on TikTok watching another creator talking about finances, talking about budgeting, talking about their taxes, and it's not necessarily correct. So I'm curious to see, how do you work with your clients, the resources, the tools to kind of keep them on that straighter path of reality?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because I've talked to my team a lot about it, that there's more information now than ever in human history, right?
Absolutely. It's everywhere.
And most of it's free. So,
Doesn't mean it's correct, but
right.
it is
No, but
free.
yeah. And the question is not whether the information is correct or not correct. I mean, yes, you can verify information. Like if you're seeing it from multiple sources and respectable websites like the IRS, I mean, like, yes, you can say, okay, that's probably correct. But what that doesn't do, and what is so necessary, is giving context and judgment to that information. So, like, what does that mean to you as the business owner? And should I or should I not act on it? And that all comes down to the relationship. Do you trust the person that is giving you their judgment?
And do you find, any of your resources or tools that you work with your small business clients? It is the creative space, but I'm assuming that can be translated to areas that aren't in those creative spaces, like a retail or a wholesale, that kind of a thing. So any kind of tips or tricks that you try to give that's standard for all your clients, or do you kind of try to customize it because it depends on what they're doing?
No, I think business is business. And I heard the founder of Boston Market, the franchisor, speak, and he said, business boils down to two problems. It's either you have to get the business or you have to do the business. Like you got to go find the work or you got to do the work, right?
Right.
That's
right.
it. And everything business falls under one of those two categories. Because it's simple doesn't mean it's easy. So the things that I really lean into with clients and small business owners, specifically around finance, are knowing a couple of key numbers, such as what's your gross margin? What is your labor efficiency? What is your liquidity? Those types of things that are core to any business. And then, like, how do you move the needle on those? What activities can you do during the day, week, month that's going to make that number improve?
Right. And how that, like liquidity is a very good thing to understand. I think people look and they go, well, I brought in $50,000 and I spent $45,000, and don't realize they spent $45,000, and they look at that bottom number and they're left with an income of $5,000. And then how does that translate? I didn't make any money. Well, the liquidity, the cash flow, the physical, like, were you still able to spend? You brought in $50,000. What were you able to do with that $50,000? And yes, you can then turn it on a dime and go, well, $5,000 in profit from a tax perspective is not going to nail you too much for self-employment or business income tax. But it's getting them to understand that, yeah, you brought in that money and you used it. You have the liquidity, and hopefully you're putting some away, right? Hopefully you're saving some of it to help that.
Yeah. I mean, I think 99% of the questions that an accountant answers, a CPA, taxpayer, or whatever, for business owners is how much did I make? Where did it go? And how
Right.
much taxes do I owe? I mean, that's it. That's what they want to know.
But like you mentioned, having those other measures can help them grow,
100%.
or, right?
Yeah.
Switch business, maybe you have to review your business plan and make some adjustments and,
Well,
and things like that.
those questions are more reactive, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's looking backwards. And a solid accountant should be able to answer all of those questions, right?
Right.
I think where the real value is being integral to where is the company going? And okay, do you have a business plan? And okay, do you have a forecast for that? And what that looks like financially and where the potholes might be. In a previous life, I was a commercial banker. I don't like to get to that.
It's all good.
I saw where businesses grew too fast. And in today's age with service and technology, it's not as big a deal, but you can still grow yourself into bankruptcy. It's very possible.
I agree. I mean, where I'm at, there was a local restaurant, that family restaurant that absolutely everybody loved, and they grew too fast. I mean, they unfortunately just had to close. They went from one location during COVID and grew. Peruvian chicken. It was fabulous, like
right?
Amazing chicken. And he opened up 3 more spots in the area. And I think just being stretched thin with staff and the cost. I know things are more expensive now, but the way he grew, and right now he's closed everything down, and we hope that maybe he can look at his business plan and come back. But very heartbreaking to see that, and not knowing the financial side of it.
Yeah. And he sought the counsel of a CPA, a financial advisor, he might have been able to avoid that.
Or he did and just decided.
Well, that's true too.
And there's nothing wrong with that, right? Small business owners, they do talk to their professionals and then they decide, I want to go do it. Then you're like, okay, I've given you information. I've helped educate you to read your stuff. And hopefully they'll make the right choice. There's no shame in that. It's just, it might not work out for you.
Well, and I'm the first to admit, like, I don't know how to run your business. You're the best person to run your business. I don't have the knowledge that you do. What I can do is share my knowledge and ask the questions. And that's my role.
And talking about this, you talk about financial adversity relating to success and understanding your money. How do you translate that with your creative industry? What is it that the adversity that you find a lot in that industry to try and help them that maybe even other entrepreneurs and small business owners can understand?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge for creatives is what I call the three-prong test. And every business owner has a two-prong test is, can I sell something? Will the market buy something? And two, can I make any money off of it? Like, are my costs less than I'm charging? The creative brings another element in there, and that's, do I want to do it? And there's kind of this false paradigm among creatives that you have, on one hand, you can do what pays the bills and it sucks your soul out of you, or I can do what I really like and I may or may not make any money off of it. And so in the book, Profit First for Creatives, the subtitle is Redefining the Creative Money Paradigm, because that's a false paradigm. I contend that, and the core message of the book is, you don't have to sacrifice creativity to make money. Profit and creativity are actually very much entwined. You think about any business owner, they're bringing something new to the table, a new location, a new product, a new price, new service, whatever. And it's that creativity that creates a profit. So for most creatives, it's really just about rethinking that mindset that profit is okay, it's to be expected, and it's not going to require me to do things that I hate.
Yeah. And you bring up Profit First, and I haven't read the whole book or listened to the whole book, but I have gone to some webinars directly from Profit First and gone to different networkings, and just that mindset of how we think about our money in our business. And to me, it is so intriguing about the idea of paying yourself first before you have your buckets of savings, your profit, and your expenses, and not letting the expenses drive the business, but letting, I guess, the income kind of drive it in how you then distribute it throughout your business is a simple form of it. I mean, it's opened my eyes as a CPA just of that thought process. And I'm like, ooh, I've got to try this for myself and figure that out.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of CPAs I've come across that are kind of like resistant to the Profit First model.
Yeah, I could see why. I can understand why.
But I'm like, it wasn't made for you.
Right.
It was made for the business owner, because traditional accounting is designed for compliance, really, and reporting.
Right.
And Profit First is a tool to help you manage your money.
Yeah, very true. Very true. And interestingly enough, I know this might seem crazy, but I'm trying it a little bit with our personal finances. I'm curious to see, does the business model of paying yourself first and then putting away for some savings, profit or whatever, and then what do you have left to go to your expenses, and trying to live within those means, and just to see how does it work. And I think so far it is.
Yeah. And, Mike Michalowicz, who wrote Profit First, based it on some very solid psychological things. Like, one of them is Parkinson's law, which that law was discussed in the context of administrative government officials, and a study that was done where basically they filled their time. But the way it applies to us and money is that if you have money, you'll spend it. So it's about intentionally setting it aside, and then when it's gone, then you don't have it to spend.
Right. Right. And there are all kinds of different ways that businesses can think about doing their money, and the principles. You're right. The basic principles of accounting have to still be there. There's still compliance. There's still things you have to do. But how you get to that point and record your there's still ways you have to record your transactions, but when your income comes in, if you decide I want to put 10% away to make sure I can cover my estimated taxes, being intentional to pull that out of whatever monthly or biweekly money you're bringing in, it is a way of saying, okay, but I budget. Well, okay, you budget, but how do you fill those buckets? How are you moving the transactions through so that you feel confident? And it takes time. And I'm sure when you talk to your clients, they have to understand if they're going from a hobby into entrepreneurship or already creating a small business, they have to be able to handle the highs and lows and know that even when you're in your lowest of low, there is light at the end of that tunnel, and helping your clients understand that.
Yeah. And I think that a lot of business owners, they try to budget in the business and it doesn't work. And I'm like, well, that's because you're in charge of it, right?
Yeah, right.
A budget was designed for a big business to delegate spending authority. So you're going to give the marketing department, you have a $100,000 budget. That's what a budget is. When you're talking about your personal finances or your business finances, either one, you've got to have more structure and control over it. Because if you don't make your budget, what do you do about it?
Right.
So what?
So what, right? Especially for your solopreneurs, your entrepreneurs that work like myself, me, myself, and I can make the determination, whatever I want to do with my money, I have to live with those consequences. And, if I'm buying all kinds of bags and purses, my husband always jokes, I try to treat myself at the end of tax season and I always get myself something special. And he's like, oh, more shoes or more bags. I'm like, not really. But again, if I've worked hard and I've managed how I want my finances, spend a little splurge as long as it doesn't affect how you run your business.
Absolutely. And that's the beauty, I think, of Profit First is this built-in gift to yourself, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
The profit account. And you show up at the end of the quarter and there's this chunk of money and it's like, well, I can do whatever the hell I want with it.
Right. Right. You can invest it, save it, spend it on, whatever you choose, throw it back into the business. I mean, that's the beauty of having that mentality of checking on things every day. Hey, it's time for a money break. Welcome back from our money break. So I have to say, one of the questions when I was reading through your bio when we were matching up on Podmatch is the question was giving a glimpse into your daily financial routine, how you manage your finances. And I just have to say for myself, I mean, I don't know about you as a CPA, but I keep a lot of numbers up in here, especially my personal finances. It's just there. And I actually do a full check 3 times a month. I go through, and because of how our bills are and how my husband gets paid. But I'll tell you, on a daily basis, I might go through and check my credit card statements. So I'm curious for yourself and how that kind of correlates to when you're working with businesses, what you're doing on your daily financial routine. And do you recommend that to your businesses as well?
Yeah. So I am fortunately to a point where I have been able to delegate that to a tenured employee. But before that, it was literally checking what hit the bank account every day. Do I know what that is? You can do the same thing with a credit card, but too many people, it's just out of sight, out of mind. And as long as it's under this amount, or as long as the bank's at this level, I'm not going to look at it. And for me, I had to go to the 180 degrees and look at everything. That was the only way I could do it. Because for a long time, I didn't. It was like, I'd look at the financial statements, it's close enough.
You weren't delving into, my bank account's at 10,000. Yeah, that's about where it needs to be. But there could be issues there, right?
100%.
There could be fraud. If you're not paying attention, there could be fraud there, which can really hurt a business. There's also the idea that, and I know things are a lot more digital and electronic now, but for those that are still writing physical checks, or there are those electronic checks that you send and it gets mailed, a paper check. And if you're not paying attention to those checks actually clearing, you're thinking, this money's already out of the bank, but it might not be. And then you have to go back to that vendor or whomever and say, hey, I paid you these 3 things, but why didn't you cash the checks?
Yeah.
You're right. I think digital and electronic, using things like Xero or QuickBooks or online accounting software, people tend to forget that they don't have to, they should still be reconciling their books, but a lot of people don't. A lot of clients that I work with, that is what I do. I help them with that. but I kind of work through them with it because they have to pay attention to why didn't checks clear? Why is this deposit not the right way?
Yeah. And that's not everybody's ball of wax. And so that's where outsourcing to folks like you makes sense because somebody needs to do it. I mean, to your point, it's not a question of if, it's a question of when you're going to have fraud, or maybe it's not fraudulent, but it's wrong. Like something got charged to your credit card or debited to your bank account that was not accurate.
And if you're not paying attention or you don't have staff or a professional to help you pay attention, and that's something else too. And I'm sure you help your clients with that too, is when you hire somebody, whether it's internal bookkeeper or somebody on the outside to help you do your financial side of the business, you still need to pay attention. You can't just hand it off to somebody and forget it because they're just going to keep doing whatever they're doing and it might not be correct.
You have to know enough.
Yes.
You don't have
You
to
do.
know everything, but you got to know enough.
You definitely have to know enough. Is there anything else you can share for small business clients that you've learned over the years working with your creative industry that they may need to be aware of or know?
Well, I think one of the most powerful chapters in the book is on value pricing. And I go in depth about our experience with it, where it came from for us. But I'm not a student of pricing or marketing, but I am kind of fascinated by it and the psychology behind it. In the book, I use the example of the cost difference between tap water and bottled water. And like, why is one 100 times more expensive than the other? And it's not what you think it is. And when it comes to how to use that for your business, it's really starts with understanding the problem that you're solving for your clients and the value that is to them. In creative spaces, that's sometimes hard to nail down. Like if you're an interior designer and you're redoing the kitchen, what's the value of that? I don't know. Maybe it's the wow factor when your neighbors come over, or maybe it's this was the way my childhood kitchen looked and I wanted it. Like, how do you put a value on that? I don't know. But the point is that until you really understand what the value is, and a lot of times you can quantify that value. Sometimes you can't, but a lot of times you can. You can't really appropriately set your price.
Very true.
Right?
Very true.
Too many business owners, accountants are the worst.
I am going to be right there with you. I agree. I can honestly tell you that's hard. It's hard to value.
What's my time and cost? Like, how many hours did I put in it? Blah, blah, blah. And which is fine if you're making money and you're making the money you want. But the reality is that you're leaving money on the table.
I agree with you on that. Absolutely. 100%. And I'm guilty of it. I'm guilty of it.
Like I said, accountants are the worst. I mean, I'm sure you've seen this. I've seen a tax return, same tax return priced anywhere from $300 to $5,000. And I'm like, huh? I mean, like, people are paying both, right?
Right.
And that's a strange thing.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's hard because tax returns are different based off of the tax person. Depending on their tax situation, there can certainly be a base. Everybody has to do pretty much has to do a 1040. You make a certain level of income, you have to do a 1040. It's just then the question of what do you do when you've got to add the other schedules and the other situations? How complex is the return? And then, of course, you get a lot of people, and I'm sure you've come across this with tax preparation. Oh, it's a really simple return. When in reality, it's not just that it's a simple return to fill out. You're doing other things while you're preparing that return. Communicating with the client, filing it, et cetera.
And to your point, it may be simple, but to dovetail that in with the value pricing, what is it that the client is really paying for? And maybe that's, I had a bad experience with a preparer and the IRS, and I don't want that to happen again. Okay, they're going to pay more. And the truth of the matter is, in everything, what you pay for it drives the value that you perceive from it. That's why Louis Vuitton bags go for, $3,000.
I will not buy one.
Right.
It's just not right.
but there's not that much more to it than,
No.
right?
It's a bag. It literally is a bag that holds stuff. Granted,
Exactly.
okay, fancy leather maybe, fancy designs, but at the end of the day, it's a bag. It
Exactly.
doesn't.
So they're paying the people that buy Louis Vuitton and the people that pay for a $5,000, W2 1040, they're
Right.
paying for something else. And to me, it's about really understanding your customer, your target market, and understanding what it is that they're trying to solve.
And going along with that, and I'm sure you have these conversations with your clients of having the confidence and being comfortable with providing that value and what that price is and not apologizing for it. If you've done your due diligence in your business and you know where you want it to go and you know what you provide, there's no apology there.
No. And you see this like with creatives all the time. It's like, well, I can produce that video on my iPhone. Like, what do I need you for? Or why do I need to spend $1,000 for that? It's like, no, 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 no. Yes, you can make your own video. You can do your own taxes. That's not what you're paying me for.
The value, the service, what is it that you can get that, okay, yeah, I can film on my phone and I come up with the video, but if it's not going to give what I want, if I'm hiring somebody to produce something for my business or for whatever, my wedding or whatever, you want a certain look to it or you want a certain, level of quality that you might not get with you filming it yourself.
Yeah. My father in law is a CPA, and
Okay.
I finally fired him 2 years ago.
Oh, God.
And I can't really say I fired him because I never charged him, but he literally would do his own tax return and then send it to us to do it again.
Interesting.
Yeah. And I'm like, people are
That's
strange. People
interesting.
are strange. I'm telling you.
And that is something I think that small business owners need to understand too is whomever you're dealing with, when you're running your business, that customer service that goes with it, you're going to come across some very odd things and you have to just learn how to manage that. And even in the financial stuff, there's going to be weird things that pop up that you need to be paying attention. If you don't know where to go, talk to your professional, find somebody to help you with that.
Yeah. And I think, for me, the hardest thing was to learn to be able to say no. Like,
Absolutely. Yes.
we're not the best fit for you. Now, you could do that sometimes with price and they'll self select, like,
Right.
okay, I don't want to pay that. But just because they pay it doesn't mean they're not going to be a pain in the ass, difficult to work with, unappreciative, rude, demanding. And as entrepreneurs, I think we have a tendency when we first start out to want to take everything because we want to pay
Absolutely.
the bills. But then there's this, I want to help people. But the reality is that you can't help everybody. And you need to be able to say no. The easiest way for me to do that is I just have a group of colleagues and I say, you know what? I'm not the person for you, but here's Nick's number because I think he might be able to help you out.
But not every business or entrepreneur can do that. So there's financial challenges in that, or they're so specialized that, they can't. And I think you make a very valuable point that, yes, when we get started, when I started my business, I'll just take whoever I could take to do tax work. I started with just individual tax work. I'm now shifting to more business consulting with the tax and accounting as well in the area I'm at. But those challenges are because financially you want to be able to do well and survive to continue. So does that kind of fit in some of the common financial challenges, especially in the creative world that you see, or for any business owners? What are some of those challenges that you see from a financial aspect?
I go back to pricing. I mean, because that's the biggest lever you can use in your business. I mean, you can cut costs all day long, but you're going to reach a point where you can't cut anymore. And then what? Then how do you make more money? And it's in the revenue and the margin. And for me, it's shifting that mindset from the internal discussion of this is what we do. We do bookkeeping, we do taxes, we do payroll, whatever, or a creative. It's I shoot film, I edit film, I make commercial videos, whatever they're thinking about it internally, to shifting it to what problem are you solving for the client or the customer? because that's where the value is and that's where the profit is.
I agree. And like I said, I've been doing this for myself for about 11 years. It'll be 11 years in September. And I underpriced myself when I started because 2 small kids, I knew I wasn't going to take a lot of people on, and I was getting back into the tax world after being in the nonprofit world for 6 years. So again, that learning curve for me and the connections. And I've shifted, and I'm sure you've seen this. I don't know so much about law firms, but a lot of accounting firms are switching to subscription-based or annual fee that you can pay monthly, getting away from that hourly kind of a rate. And I have shifted to that. I mean, my returns are all flat rates, but I was losing out on money because during the rest of the year, if a client called, I wasn't charging them for that conversation when I should have been.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, I was just having this conversation yesterday with some other entrepreneurs, not accountants, but we were talking about that, having a fixed fee or a menu of services, and like, then how do you handle the outliers where there are extras? And I was like, well, what we did when we went through and looked at our pricing last year for our tax returns, and we realized we were underpriced. I mean, that was one thing that we had not addressed in several years. And I was shocked how much the market had gone up. And we started looking at it, and my internal team was asking those questions. Well, what if this and what if that? And I'm like, just list your clients and set your price at about 60 or 70% of the average. So if average is 50%, bump it up 10 or 20% and start there. It's like, what's the worst that could happen?
They don't come back to you.
And you end up doing less work and get more money.
Yeah, very true. I mean, it is definitely, I think, for entrepreneurs, that balance. And I think the only way, or one of the ways that you know if your pricing is right, or you're not just looking at industry levels, is having that review of your financials and learning at least what does it mean, with my profit and loss and how that flows into the balance sheet for my cash flow and liquidity. And like you said, the gross margin, all those things can help you. And it is hard. We're living in interesting times, and pricing, everything's gone up. And I get all the time. I mean, I'm sure you get it. I get the emails or the phone calls. How cheap can you do my return?
Not very is the answer.
No. And I'm like, I don't think I'm the one for you. This is my price. This is why it is my price. I hit a lot of pushback with my individual clients on this subscription-based idea. Pay me monthly a fee so that you have access to me all year long.
You got questions?
That kind of thing, that model. And I got an extreme amount of pushback from them. And my frustration with that, as I'm sure business owners get as well, and entrepreneurs, is I'm trying to give you a service or a value all year long so that you don't have an issue come tax time, or you don't have an issue at some point and you come knocking on my door, and then I'm like, well, now that you're here, this is the rate now.
Yeah, I've always wondered why accountants don't have pricing like airlines. Like if you come in January, you got one price. You come March, it's twice.
Oh, it's right, double, triple, whatever.
Sorry.
Yeah. And I think business owners need to think of it maybe on some level with their financials and understanding that just because you set something at one price doesn't mean you can't evaluate that and go back and explain, hey, and it's not just because the price of whatever I bring in went up. I'm realizing my value of what I provide to you has potentially gone up.
And that starts with having a deep understanding of the problem you're solving for your customer or client. And because, you can't just say, I do tax returns for individuals. Well, I mean, how do you define the problem and value proposition for them? But if I said, well, I'm doing it for military expatriates that have a spouse that lives stateside, okay, that I can sink my teeth in because I can understand better what problem I'm trying to solve for them.
And I think that's important for all entrepreneurs, all businesses, to have that. Why are you doing what you're doing? And then correlating that to the financial side of it.
That's probably the biggest mistake I did in business, was not clearly defining my target market for too long. And for a while, I thought I had defined it, but it was still too broad.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm right there with you. And like I said, I'm doing a shift now, and I'm really trying to define it. I've defined who I want to work with, why I want to work with them, because Some of it is frustration. Tax season the last 5 years has been quite rough. That again, taking a look back at we go back to talking about when you start a business and you price at a certain point just to get the business in. And at some point, if you lose that passion or that spark about what you're doing, that has to be part of it. It might not be all of it, but I think that financial things in the business have to be part of it.
Yeah. Do I want the physician that I'm hiring to do my surgery to be the one that's charging the least, and I'm his 10th surgery of the day,
right?
And he's not even awake? And that's what you get sometimes with accountants. They're working 12, 14 hours a day and they're making mistakes.
Yeah. But I would think that correlates to the creative industry in any industry,
it applies
right?
to any business. Absolutely.
Yeah. So is there anything else you would like to share, any kind of wisdom that you give your clients that, are entrepreneurs and small business owners that are listening that I think would be important for them to know?
I think, and this is not specific to finances, but as an entrepreneur, I think there is a tendency to get siloed, to get isolated. I have found it extremely important during my business career to have relationships with others in my industries, other business owners, even if they're not in the business that I'm in, to, just have a place to ask questions and vent. Because a lot of times as a business owner, your spouse doesn't understand what you're talking about. You can't talk to your friends necessarily about it. And that can be a very lonely place. So
absolutely,
having that group of colleagues that you can confide in and ask questions honestly and say, here's what I'm dealing with and I don't know what to do.
Even if they're not in the same industry.
Absolutely.
I mean, networking groups, chambers are so important because it's how we can help each other. And I think, you say, oh, it's not financial, but on some level it is, because if you can have those networking and the people to chat with about whatever is going on in your business, it helps you refocus yourself and kind of get back to what you need to do to run your business.
It helps you refocus. It also inspires you. I've got some colleagues that have made more money than I could ever dream of. And there's maybe a little envy, but it's also of what's possible. We get in our own heads and we just assume something has to be the way that it is. And seeing that it can be different, whatever that is, whether it be finances or just quality of life or time, or to me, it's inspiring. Well, why can't I do that?
Well, this has been a very inspiring conversation. Christian, this has been great. Is there anything else, whether from business or personal finance, you could share even with our young adults out there who might be getting started with their own type of business or just in general, when it comes to anything financial or understanding your money?
Well, I think I'd circle back. One of the first books I read right out of college was Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki.
I've heard it's a great book. I need to start reading that.
And it really just opened my eyes to this idea of what you've learned about money. And it made me start questioning some things that, you knew to be true. And I guess I wouldn't ignore that as a young person. Even if you had a great family, they weren't financial professionals, right?
No.
And so don't assume that what you truly believe is true.
Yeah, I like that. Christian, thank you so much for joining me today.
My pleasure.
Hey, it's your financial maven, and I want to hear from you. Feel free to leave me your insights and money stories or questions that you may have about money. You can visit www.yourfinancialmavenpodcast.com and click on the I Want to Hear From You tab. I can't wait to hear what you have to say about money. The purpose of this podcast is to provide general information on the subjects discussed. It is for educational, informational, and entertainment purposes only. You should consult your CPA, accountant, or tax professional for all of your specific financial needs or situations. Your Financial Maven is hosted and produced by Samantha M. Besnoff, CPA, and Your Financial Maven, LLC. Editing is done by Kris Zarnoch of KMZen Creative. Music is written, composed, and performed by Daniel Shore.